Lovecraft Country, new pulp horror series, just wrapped up its 10-episode season on HBO. It's based on a novel on the same title, which is a sort of retelling of Lovecraftian horror with the added aspect of racial tensions in the 1950s America. The series starts off with a young black veteran of the Korean War named Atticus arriving back in Chicago in search of his father, who has apparently gone missing. He joins forces with his uncle George, who writes tour guides for black people, much like the titular Green Book from the recent movie, and Letty, his childhood friend who also just recently came back to Chicago's South Side. Together, they all go towards Ardham, a small town where Montrose, Tick's missing dad, has likely gone. What they then encounter on the road is a lot, and I mean a lot, of racism, coming both from regular rural folk but also from the police. But that's not everything, as it will quickly turn out that there is some supernatural stuff going on as well. So let's talk about the narrative structure first, because it is a bit unusual. The show has an overarching narrative, a main plot of sorts, having to do with Dick, his closest family, and his this weird Lovecraftian cult trying to find out the secret to immortality. This storyline is weaved throughout the entire series. It's supposed to be this glue that connects it, but it is the main focus of only episodes 1, 2, and 10. So it serves as a sort of bookend. All of the other episodes are focused on one specific character at a time and a particular story thread linked to that character, along with some specific brand of horror. So, for example, one character's episode takes place in a haunted house with ghosts, another one has to do with alternate worlds, another one with a deadly curse. It's an interesting choice to have a series that tries to be at the same time this singular main storyline and an anthology horror series featuring loads of loosely related stuff. I think it would have worked better if it was just a straight anthology. Drop the pretense of connecting these stories and instead just have a number of self contained separate episodes. Because as it is, the series feels weak in terms of being a truly cohesive unit. A lot of the ways in which the plot threads are supposed to be connected are clunky and feel off. And on the other hand, to sort of prove my point, some of the episodes that shine the most do so because of the strengths of their individual storylines. A good example is my favorite episode, which is a flashback episode that takes place in Korea during the war. It's the most disconnected one from the rest of them, and yet it's probably the single best one because it doesn't burden itself with trying to fit in so much. It just does its own thing, and it does it wonderfully. Because what you also have to realize is that these are pulp stories that weave together, supernatural horror and racism horror, but at their core are pretty simple, pretty rudimentary. And so all the more reason that containing them to single episodes would work better. Because the more you stretch them out, the more obvious it becomes that there's not a lot of depth to it. And it all becomes more vulnerable to nonsensical plot points and stretching the story forever and becoming boring and so on. And there are moments of nonsense, and it is stretched too far, I think, the main storyline at least. However, there are also things in the series that do work. The supernatural stuff is absolutely amazing. The special effects, the brutality, the gore, the violence, just the pure insanity of what is shown on the screen. It is great, no question about it. I think the cast, almost entirely black, with the exception of villains, basically, is stellar. Jonathan Majors and Journey Smollett, especially, are great in this, and they both have that magnetic presence on screen that makes you want to see more and more of them. Very excited for both these young actors to see what projects they appear in next. In fact, Jonathan Majors has already been confirmed to sign up to play Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man 3 for Marvel, which is pretty wild. Going back to Lovecraft Country, I think the costumes, the sets are amazing, so is the music, and finally, the big thing of using racism as a horror mechanism. I think for the most part it works in the series, and there are individual moments where the racist aspects of society are genuinely so well done that these scenes become scarier than any supernatural Lovecraft shit that's also here. There's one scene in particular in the first episode, I think, with characters trying to drive out of a county before the sun comes down, because it's one of those counties where black people are not allowed outside after sunset, which was very much a real thing in America. And the tension built in that scene is just fantastic, and it made me sit on the edge of my seat. So, having said all of this, it's kind of sad that a series filled with so many individual moments of greatness doesn't actually pull through to be great overall when you look at the bigger picture. I think the flaws, coming down mainly to stretching the overarching narrative too much and therefore weakening it, prevent Lovecraft Country from being really solid, in my opinion. I think at the end of the day, it ends up being just alright. A show that has a lot of terrific tools at its disposal, but ends up wasting some of them. You could even make a case, a lot of them, in pursuit of a grand story that simply doesn't work all that well.